Welcome to my short presentation on the idea of humanitarian intervention, a new compartmentalization of the IR theories. This is a book which will be published on the 13th of December 2021 by Ibidem Press in Germany. Don't read too much into the date because, as we all know, 13th of December is anniversary date for introduction of martial law in Poland. This book is dedicated to Middle East, Syria, UN-based security system, and decision-making process. I try to showcase the way the international community approaches humanitarian emergencies and how we or people who act on our behalf respond to such crises. Basically, don't judge a book by its cover, but this cover is quite cool, to be honest, because if you can see, we have a table, decision-making table with Syria and the Middle East in the middle, and this table is surrounded by decision makers, political philosophers, IR theorists, and some of the most influential thinkers of 18th, 19th, and 20th, 21st century, to be honest. Of course, you need to use your imagination to put such people behind such a table, but let me just go through every single one of these scholars. We have Immanuel Kant representing liberalism here, Henry Kissinger, a realist thinker. We have Antonio Gramsci, Marxist. We have Hegel, representing continental philosophy. We have Cynthia Enolle representing feminism. Her work is very influential in this field. We have Jacques Derrida, post-structuralist, one of the most influential political philosophers of all time. We have Edward Said, post-colonialist. We have Niccolo Machiavelli here, pure realist and at its best, to be honest. And Samantha Power, she's an interesting addition to these deliberations because she's a very young liberal who, first of all, she was an NGO lady back in the 1990s. She was based in the Balkans. She described very interesting things which were happening in here. Ever since that, she became a US ambassador to UN in the Obama administration. Very interesting individual. I will tell you more about her in this book. The structure of the book basically composes of 8 chapters. There's introduction, there is conclusion, and each chapter is dedicated to a specific issue. The main concept is about reformulations. We talk about ontology, which is the basically the study of becoming. It is ontology is present both in IR theory, social sciences, and philosophy. And this book tries to capture the very elusive global environment and tries to give a new meaning to the idea of humanitarian intervention. Some people see this concept as a very pejorative notion, and I'm trying to show its usefulness because as you can see, in terms of IR theory alone, we have various branches, various schools or approaches that exist or coexist in this theory. And they use different ontologies, paradigms, and theory. So I treat IR theory as a scientific ontology, but also political ontology. And my concept is to incorporate philosophical ontologies, various philosophical ontologies, to help the process of finding the common ground between these various approaches. As you can see, the book would deliberate on predominantly on Syrian conflict. That would be in chapter 6. But I also touch on the matters related to former Yugoslavia, Kosovo, or Balkan conflict. And I also basically direct readers' attention to the developments in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, South Sudan, Myanmar, Yemen, Somalia, Mali, Ethiopia, and many other places that show some dangers basically, and that become very dangerous to civilian populations at large. So the other concepts which will be discussed, of course, is philosophy, epistemology, IR theory, and this basically powers the debate on the idea of humanitarian intervention. In general, philosophy, how I understand philosophy. Philosophy is very complex. I'm not a philosopher myself, but I'm a political thinker. So my idea is to incorporate the various influences, philosophical influences to IR theory to help the process of finding the truth about international relations theory. One may say, and there's many theories suggesting that the idea of humanitarian intervention is, first of all, obsolete. The whole concept is very pejorative, and it's too liberal to conservative tasting. But to be honest, back in 2019, we have had 281 humanitarian situations in 96 countries, and the international community sometimes has to intervene in the internal affairs of any given nation or country just to stop genocide or stop the genocidal behaviors of certain individuals, politicians who try to hide under the shield of sovereignty of any given nation. And this basically research is dedicated literally only to man-made humanitarian emergencies. I don't discuss much the human or international community's response to such tragedies like hurricanes, floods, droughts, or anything made by nature. This is not something which I'm predominantly focusing my research, but I recognize their importance, of course. In general, I want to distinguish between common knowledge type of explanations and I want to incorporate to typical IR approaches, typical IR explanations, more philosophical insights. So we will elaborate the ontology in-statu-nascendi. Basically, ontology in-statu-nascendi is hoping to overcome shallow, superficial, and one-dimensional explanations by embracing a self-perpetual process of a continuous attempts to befriending wisdom, basically. So try to make the whole argument more scientific by embracing a self-improvement aspect of any thorough investigation. So ontology in-statu-nascendi will account for a new hybridized merger of IR theory and political philosophy that goes deeper into the nature of any given concept because of its evolutionary and contemplative character that basically interacts on different levels with various aspects of schools and approaches which are used to certain generalizations. The idea of humanitarian intervention and the idea of in-statu-nascendi ontology should work as a fuel that puts this engine, the research, in motion. And this is possible if we understand ontology as an evolutionary study of existence and the process of being that coexists with supplements and enriches the traditional study of being, existing, and reality by incorporating various interdisciplinary elements from various schools, traditions, and studies. So basically, we try to bring more in the interdisciplinary dimension to the type of debates on humanitarian interventions, humanitarian emergencies. It encourages different type of thinking and stimulates one's intellectual curiosity no matter what. It advocates for a contemplative evolutionary manner of investigations and perpetual self-improvement, collaboration, flexibility, and openness to different interdisciplinary traditions. So we arrive at the idea of humanitarian intervention in-statu-nascendi, which is the intervention that is in the perpetual process of becoming, forming, and adjusting to the emerging new circumstances of increasing more complex local, regional, and global environment at hand. The newly emerging principle will be strengthened by recollection of all of these historical examples of historical humanitarian emergencies and the international community's responses to them. They're empowered by our modern reinterpretation of the principle of state sovereignty, human rights, the Geneva Conventions and anti-genocide legislation, and law preventing the human rights violations. And that's basically the path to attaining the ontology in-statu-nascendi. It's inclusive, it's respectful, and it's very comprehensive. It basically recommends every single IR scholar to move beyond their approaches. It is against cherry-picking paradigms or cherry-picking ontologies. It looks at the holistic manner of IR theory and works as a supplement of the IR theory, because this is not something particularly new which I'm trying to introduce. This is something which is helpful to the overall composition of the IR theory. And as we know, that's a new ontology. So this ontology has been just discovered. I evaluate it thanks to certain feedback which I recently received from professors from Sofia University, professors from University of Army and Missouri in Austin, and Nicosia University, as well as other scholars and colleagues. I can now basically find certain limitations of this ontology, and I'm working towards improving them. And once the evaluation will be finished, I will aim to incorporate and integrate this synthesized new paradigm, new ontology into the basically the structure of the IR theory to improve it. I don't want to revolutionize the IR theory. I want to start the evolutionary process of finding much more easier way of interdisciplinary, approachinary, let's say, understanding between various schools and approaches. This is in order to overcome shallow, superficial, and one-dimensional explanations. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or I don't know, feedback, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can either email me or find me on social media. So thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it very much.